Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Pod This. This is Andy Moore. And as a reminder, last week and this week are two special episodes that are recordings from Walkout to What's Next events that we held several weeks ago, just after the monumental teacher walkout of 2018. This recording and this episode is from our Monday night event that we held at the Patriarch in Edmond. We had a great crowd of 50 or 60 teachers and education advocates who were wanting to learn more about how to do this whole thing, how to do advocacy. Folks that had had a crash course in civics over the previous 2 weeks and really want to get more involved. I hope you can hear both from Scott and I, as well as some of the audience, some questions. As a reminder, Scott and I are taking a couple of weeks off for vacation. We'll be back next week with a regular episode, and we look forward to talking with you then. Thanks a lot. All right, hey everybody. My name is Andy Moore, and if you're not with us, I apologize. We're going to shout at you for the next couple hours. This is Scott Melson.
What's up, guys?
Thanks for being here. How many of you guys are teachers? All right, look at you teachers.
How many of you were at the Capitol? Outstanding.
Super. All right, so this will be a little bit different format for those of you who came yesterday. I'll tell you a little bit about Let's Fix This. We want to talk about the walkout, good, bad, ugly, and then what's next, right? How do we move forward from here? So a little bit about Let's Fix This. So my role is the executive director of Let's Fix This. Quick timeout. We're wearing mics because we have a weekly podcast that you should totally subscribe to. It's called Let's Pod This. And this is our lazy way to record for that podcast so that we don't have to do it again this week. So we recorded yesterday. Audio's okay. We're going to do it today, whichever one wins. So it'll pick up mostly us, but maybe you too, especially you. Speak up. Yesterday we got a lot of the room. It was kind of cool. So
Just charge you when we have a question.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Go.
Just run up here and Andy. I'll edit that out. So Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and we formed 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, this coming Friday actually was our very first event. And at that event, I totally thought there would be 6 people that would go to the Capitol, and there was 100, because we were all frustrated with the budget and the way things were going, the direction of our state. I just didn't know that there were that many people that wanted to take off work and go to the Capitol that day. And so from there, it snowballed. We had 200, 500, which at the time felt like a lot of people at the Capitol. Over the last few weeks, I found out that it's not that many people after all. And it was, even in the early days, it was really education focused, because in 2016, our state was facing a $1.6 billion budget shortfall. Last year, it was a little bit less. It was like $900 million. This year, we started out at about a $200 million budget shortfall, and it looks like we may actually end up not in the hole, or at least really close to not in the hole. Next year, though, definitely back in the hole already. They've already planned that out. I don't know how this happens year after year, but after 10 years of cuts, I'll be honest, I'm a little sick of it, and I think you are too. That's why you're here and nodding at me right now. So I have a day job. I work in healthcare administration. I oversee a program for people with HIV and AIDS down at the OU Health Sciences Center. Do this on the side, weekends and evenings and times like this, because this matters. Because that matters too, certainly, but this matters in a different way. And I'm so thrilled that you guys decided to come out on a beautiful Monday evening. I decided to skip class tonight. I'm just like a few weeks away from finishing my MBA, and I'm happy to skip out just on one more class. I'm almost out of opportunities to skip.
You're talking to a bunch of teachers.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of teacher, right? You guys were in college. You remember that feeling where you're like, all right, one night. Scott, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Scott Melson. I work with Andy and Let's Fix This. 2 years ago, some guy that I didn't know and had never met before posted an event on Facebook and said, hey, a bunch of us are pissed off and we're going to go to the Capitol and we're going to try and fix it. And I was like, man, somebody should. So yeah, I'll go. And there were a lot of people there. That was 2 years ago, and now we're here, and let's fix this. We're a nonprofit organization, like Andy said. I have the privilege of serving on the board and the vice president of the board of directors. So don't let him forget, he works for me.
It's true. I don't get paid, so it doesn't matter. But
I also have a day job. I work in healthcare as well. I'm a primary care doctor here in town. So primary care doctor by day, but politics super nerd at night, which is really how I got here. So
it happens. Yeah. Take a train time. Cheers to teachers. Cheers. All right, so a few housekeeping issues. Bathrooms are inside, I presume. Go at your leisure. Are there some out here? Yeah, behind the tree. Afterwards, if you want, I've got a bag of buttons, big and little. I know the mini buttons are a big hit. I've got lots of little mini buttons. You can put on. Yeah, see, claps already. Got a great deal on those. Also, a few flyers that. So far, this is eerily not windy, might not blow away. One is a little flyer about us. During the legislative session each year, we do a day at the Capitol for regular folks every month. So February, March, April, and May, the 4 months of a regular session, we do a thing at the Capitol where you can come, kind of like the Walkout, but with not 30,000 people. So you can actually get inside, maybe actually meet your legislators, have conversations. This month, it's this Thursday. So if you want to plan ahead like 3 days and come with us, that'd be terrific. And it's really, we do about an hour of kind of training. We have a few folks that are going to speak to the group. So Representatives Jason Dunnington and Cindy Munson are going to speak because they spoke at our very first one. And it's almost a week or 2 years to the day. And so that felt cool. I'm waiting for a few other confirmations. So come this Thursday. Next month, it'll be on May 9th, which is not very far away. And that is going to be Child Advocacy Day at the Capitol. So we're partnering with the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. If you guys know Joe Dorman, he's their executive director. We partnered with him last year. It's a great day because seriously, of all the issues that should be bipartisan, like children might be the most important one. So that's a big day for us. Also, I mentioned the podcast already. So, subscribe and rate us on iTunes and all that jazz. And then just other stuff about us that is, the dates are almost irrelevant. We have a letter to my legislator, which we'll talk about in a minute, but this is kind of just a template, a worksheet for you teachers to take home to write letters to your legislators. And we'll address that in a minute.
They work great for class too.
They do. Also, it's very nice paper. Little cards, because those are handier to take home than flyers. Please take some. Voter registration forms. If anyone needs to register to vote, change your registration, update it, change your party, whatever. Feel free to fill one out. I've got a pen. I'll mail it for you. Don't even worry about a stamp. If you want to just take some, because you know that your friend or your spouse or your neighbor is not registered, take it. I just printed these from the website. Like, you can print them too. But I have them for you. I keep them in my car because you never know when you're going to run into someone that's like, oh, I need to update my registration. Pull it out. My favorite example is my mom had been saying for months. She's like, oh, I need to update my registration. She's like, oh, I can print off online, right? I was like, yeah. She's like, I should do that. And I knew she's not going to do it. And so I was like, woo, here you go, Mom. And she's like, okay, I'll fill it out now. Just go ahead, I'll mail it. She filled it out, I mailed it. Good. Also, is anyone here running for office? I know someone's running for office. 1, 2, 3. How many? Raise them high. Yeah. High fives.
What are you running for?
Yeah, stand up, say your name and what office you're running for.
I'm Jackie Phillips. I'm running for H1. I'm the Democratic candidate in this district, Central Edmond.
You're next.
Oh, I'm Melanie Spoon, and I'm running for House District 81 in this area, and I'm a school teacher, but I have really cool shirts. So. Make them for you. So yes, and I've been here. I taught in Edmond for 10 years, and now I'm in Clinton City. So yes,
Excellent.
teacher running.
We can have a debate later if you guys want. We'll just stand up here.
I'm Casey Satterley. I'm right next
Excellent. Hey, thanks. Great. I do want to say, like, it's super awesome to have 2 candidates from the same district running. Also, like, we're all adults.
Right.
And there's no, like, fighting. So please don't, like, fisticuffs. I'm a therapist, so we can talk this out. If anyone else is thinking about running, maybe in 2020, whether it's school board, state house, whatever, we had a little flyer about some things to consider for running for office, because it is a big decision, as these 3 can attest. It's not to be taken lightly. There are some folks in office that it seems like they took it lightly. Like, sounds like fun. Why not? Dear God, don't let that be you. And so just some things to talk about, some questions you've probably considered. But if you haven't, take one, some other resources on there that can be helpful. I made that really quickly, so it's not an exhaustive list, just to be fair. Next year, it'll be better.
Sign-in sheet.
Yeah, what do you want to do about that?
If you guys would be willing, when we're done, we'll have a sign-in sheet up here. It's just your name and email address. You'll get 1 email a month tops, and it just has like our upcoming events. We're not going to sell your information. No Cambridge Analytica. Like, it's not going to like figure out who all your friends are on Facebook and what they looked at. It literally will be 1 email a month that you get with our upcoming events, dates, ways to get involved, podcast episodes, those sorts of things. So if you would be willing and you're not on our list already, we would be ever so grateful if you would sign
I'll just
up.
pass this around.
Or we'll do that.
I'll put a few pieces of paper with it, in case you want to write more. Here you go. You guys can start. No obligation. Scott's right. It's 1 email a month. Maybe 2 if I've got some dead time. But I don't have time to send them all out. Usually it's like, oh, shoot, today's the day. I got to send it. So I've already sent 2 this month because we had a few events that popped up, and I felt like I should send that out. I felt a little guilty about it because I definitely promised some folks at the Walkout Rockout that it was 1 a month, and I sent 2 in the same week, and I feel bad about that, so I apologize. If I misled you, you T-shirt, I'm sorry. I know, that's right, yeah. I'm done. That's why I helped organize this event. So, all right, super. So we wanted to start by doing like a debriefing about the walkout. So again, how many of you went to the walkout for at least 1 day? Almost everybody. That's terrific. For those of you who went, how many of you was that the very first time you had been to the Capitol for like an advocacy kind of purpose? All right.
Awesome.
That's super exciting too. So, and I say this all the time, but in almost all of our events, it feels like, I haven't done the exact count, but almost half the group are new. Even today, I was there for, today was Autism Day at the Capitol, and they asked me to come speak. And even it was a small-ish group. And even in that group, about 1/3 of them were brand new, had never come to the Capitol before. The other 2/3 were hardcore advocates, which is why they were there. But I thought it's so exciting that people are going up there for the first time, because that was me. Like 2 years ago, I had never been there. I didn't know who my rep was. I didn't know my senator. I didn't know anything about the building, where the bathrooms were. I didn't know that we owned the building. That's bananas to me. Like, I'm glad they're fixing it up a little bit because it looks a little shoddy. And I don't want rocks falling on my head. But the fact that we can go anytime you want, we can go right now. Nothing's going on, I don't think, but we did last year. We went, they had session in the evening one time, and so some of us went up there that evening, and the legislators were very surprised to see.
They do crazy stuff at night.
Yeah.
Like crazier than usual.
Yeah. It's the end of the day, they're tired, they got to get out of there, and so like 30 of us walked in and just sat in front of them, stared at them in the face. And the few that knew we were coming were like, hey guys, all right. And everyone else was like, what the hell is going on? I wore shorts, which I felt a little mixed about. So for those of you who went and those of you who watched it online or have read about it, talked to people who went there, what were some of the really great things about the walkout? What are your favorite stories? What are the best parts about the walkout? This?
That it led to us getting together for advocacy and to continue this.
Yeah.
Instead of staying in a complacent mode of just going, well, they're just going to do whatever, and we just have to deal with it.
Okay, so it was a starting point.
Change it. So it's
Yeah.
starting all of this.
Yeah, great. Yes, ma'am.
I marched in 90, and I was thinking, I hope people show up, so I was pleasantly surprised that
Yeah, yeah,
we should have gotten more active, become more activists years ago.
right.
Oh well, better late than never.
Right.
True
Yeah,
story.
So there's been a few folks that were there that I've talked to that marched in 1990, which led to some sweeping education change. As it turns out, like, we came full circle, and all that money went away, and here we are again, doing it again. It's like, all right. And if they don't understand that we were going to come back every 30 years if we have to, like, we're going to make this change happen. So, but I'm sure, like you guys, a lot of stories of friends who were marching with their mothers or grandmothers who were teachers that marched then, and to carry on that legacy. And that's not two distinct points. That is a legacy, and that makes it stronger on both ends. So that's super exciting.
I marched with my mother in 1990. My mom's a public school teacher, and I was met there as a teenager.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I hope that my daughter's not here in 30 years doing the same exact thing I'm doing as a public school teacher.
Right.
It just seems ridiculous to me.
Right. Yeah, you're not alone. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Edmond. I was a page during Household 1017.
Okay.
And so, yeah, hi, Devin. But I was a page during the first thing, and then to go back and see it again, and they said it wasn't going to work. They said it wasn't. And so I'm a fifth generation teacher. I had 3 generations of teachers of my family members out there for 9 days. And then to see it happen again was tragic and important. And then to have my daughter have to attend Edmond door to have 1 day off and to come back right into testing, I thought was absolutely apprehensive. So it made a full circle with lots of connections. And being a nurse, went out there and saved a couple lives in the process. So
Sure. Great. Well, that's right. You're running also, right?
after the candidate.
Oh, yeah. So you're running for office. We asked the other candidates to say their name and what they're running for.
Hi, my name is Devin, and I'm running for House District 39, which is that way in Edmond, just a little bit across the street from here. And like I said, I was a fifth-generation teacher. I've been a trauma nurse for the last 20 years. So I started in elementary ed and then started teaching nursing when I became a nurse. So I have a couple of things that are super important to me. Advocacy, of course, is one of them. But being a nurse and us having mental health issues and healthcare issues is dramatic. So I have a lot of issues that are super important. I have material. All of my issues are very well articulated on my website. So if you have any questions about 9 or 10 things, they're on there on point. And we're having a volunteer day on the 28th at Slotchkey. If anybody wants
Cool. Super. Thanks, Devin. All right. What else is good? Yes, ma'am.
I was really impressed and touched by the amount of students I saw that were my students that were out there. The ones who gave speeches were so eloquent, and my kids were so fired up, and it meant so much that they see what we do, and it was so touching.
Yeah.
That was a big part.
So that's a huge thing, right? Is that not only were teachers and parents there, but there were students there taking charge, organizing things on their own, and they outdo us every time, right? And so to see them up there giving speeches, I spoke to the crowd. It's intimidating when there's a few thousand people standing looking at you. You're like, oh, whatever I plan to say is not as important as I thought it was going to be. And so hats off to them. And aside from the fact that they were there inspiring us, I'm really proud of all of you who went because you inspired them. And to see kids, to see high school students who are going to be able to vote in months or the next couple of years, they will remember this. And so I hope that you go back to your classrooms and you remind them of how important it is to vote. Lots of folks register, not a lot of folks turn out to vote. That includes teachers, right? You guys all know, like, we can be bad about that. Not anymore. So let's kick it up. What else? What else is good? Yes, ma'am.
I'm a teacher at Memorial High School, and I just think one of the things that might go without being noticed, and the other teachers know that we've bonded with our buildings more, with our coworkers, but then also with our students and with parents, and then we're taking that back into our schools, and I think maybe just the effects of those bonds, that sets, our kids are going to see those relationships, and that sets a standard for how we act and how we love each other and take care of each other and work together as a team.
That's right. Yeah. It's a different kind of relationship that you have with one another and with your students when you've been through something, right? Oklahoma knows that pretty well. Last week, being the whatever year it was for the bombing, right? For those of you who were here then, it changes who you are. It changes how you relate to one another. I think we're going through something similar, that as a nation and certainly as a state, we are at a reckoning about who we are and what we stand for and how we're going to make that a part of our future. And so we got to talk to one another and build those relationships and move forward like that. And I think it was kind of awesome that 30,000 teachers got a crash course in civics again over the last couple of weeks and had to relearn things that you might have learned in 8th grade but had long since forgotten. The Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law. As it turns out, it is not that easy. I've watched that video a few times. I'm like, that's not how it works. Right, that's at the federal level, but here, there's a few steps out, right. And nothing is as cut and dry as I would like it to be. I started making a flow chart the other day of how in Oklahoma a bill becomes a law. It's like, well, it does this, and then they kind of cross chambers, and then like the wheels fall off, and this guy comes in from nowhere, and gets
floor substitute changes the content entirely.
Literally anything can happen, and so that's where we come in to help break that down. Anything else? Last statements about what was good from the walkout?
Was there?
My daughter told our rep that she was disappointed in him. I thought that was like.
Can I ask who your representative is?
Martinez.
Okay.
Running against this lady
Oh,
down
right,
there.
sure.
All right.
How old's your daughter?
She's 16. She goes
Right.
to Edmond North.
Nice.
She was like forever in his Meg Jackson, running for treasurer at Stuco. You teach us. But he didn't vote to discuss it on the floor for an hour with the mics on, and
Right.
Republicans said no to that, and everything was in party lines. And she asked him why, or she asked him why. He said because Scott Edmond wanted to do it, and she said, well, I'm disappointed in your answer. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
It's
and
cool.
that's a fair statement, right?
Right.
It's okay. Scott.
I think that's a really great point to make. Like, I think it can be very intimidating to go and talk to these folks, and easy to forget that they work for you, right? They work for us. That doesn't mean that it's okay to shout and get in their face and scream and be unreasonable, but it is entirely appropriate to say, I'm really disappointed in that vote that you took. I'm really disappointed in that vote that you didn't take. I would hope to see something different out of my representative. That's a perfectly reasonable statement to say, and one that, quite frankly, they don't hear often enough, in my opinion.
Also, that's the kind of statement that, like, when your parents say that to you, they're not mad. I'm just really disappointed.
Right.
You're like, oh man.
So-
and to have a teenager say that, come on, like that's bad.
Did anybody else have anything that was kind of a
Good.
I got a card today from she's 5, teach kindergarten, and it said, "Thanks for getting me the money." So she doesn't know the whole story, but
Right.
right?
in a Starbucks, so that was
I love it.
Yeah.
and didn't expect him to come out of the office, and I was sort of like, it's like starstruck. But like you said,
Right.
he works for us, so I engaged in conversation and invited him to come to Edmond North to see, because sometimes there's a misperception of, oh, well, you guys are doing really well and everything's fine, and I talked about the size of classes and things like that, and I filled out something and sent, I invited him to come, and today, or yesterday, I called up and I had a voicemail from his assistant.
Yeah.
Like,
Nice.
Awesome.
That's exciting.
Awesome.
So I'm so glad you shared that. A couple of reasons. Scott and I both know Adam. He's a good guy. Like, he's
Yeah.
a freshman, and this year we had about 40 freshman legislators coming in, brand new, green. Many of them were teachers or ran because of what happened 2 years ago, right? And so on Facebook or Twitter, I had some folks that were responding to us to Let's Fix This about the walkout and express some frustration that Senator Pugh wasn't able to meet with them, and they felt he was dodgy. And like, I get that. It's tough when you go there. Is there a doctor in the house? And so, that's right,
today.
yeah. And so, but that's the case. I mean, like, when there's 30,000 people there, like not everybody gets to meet with everybody.
Yeah.
And that leaves some people feeling very satisfied and others feeling very dissatisfied. And so, I'm glad you shared that. I will let him know because I talked to him one day in the rotunda, and it's funny because it was packed, right? And he walked by and was like, "Hey, what's up?"
Yeah.
And so we stood there and talked, and I kept waiting, and no one came up to him because no one knows who he is yet. And so,
Learned about the pins yet.
right, yeah, yeah, you gotta look at the lapel pins. And so we had about 20 minutes to talk, and he talked about how many teachers he had visited with. Same thing with John Eccles in the house, that he had his LA count how many people, like so many was in groups of 40 or so at a time, that he visited with thousands of teachers over the couple of weeks, and was exhausted by the end because that's a lot of faces, a lot of conversations to have, and a lot of flack to catch, right? As the floor leader, he catches a lot of flack from me and Scott and all of y'all and everybody else, and maybe some of it like rightly so. And so it's nice to be like, yeah, we were here to hold you accountable, and we want that to not stop. So so thank you for sharing that.
Was there anything about the walkout that you feel like maybe didn't go the way you hoped, or anything that was
We can form a line over here if you
anything
like.
that was maybe frustrating? What are your thoughts? You were firsthand. Right. So kind of maybe feeling like what you felt like you were supposed to talk about was moving quickly and kind of changing. Is that right? Okay. Okay. All
Fair
right.
point. And that's true. And like, that's part of that crash course in civics, right? Is that for me, when I first started going up to the Capitol and paying attention, I didn't know anything about deadlines or when stuff happens or any of that. And so to find out, like, we started going on April 27th of 2016, and that's after virtually all the deadlines that mattered. And so it was like, yeah, let's change something. And they're like, no, it's over. No, it's over, man. Like, it's not all over, first of all. It's never over. There's always something they can do if they want to bad enough. They just don't want to. And so, but to come in and try to figure all that out on the fly is really hard. And can be really disappointing sometimes and frustrating. So, yeah, I'm with you.
What else?
I think not, like, in that process of learning everything, then also not knowing important questions that I should have known from our side of it, like, what do we really need to fund education in Oklahoma? Like, I couldn't really answer that. I was like, well, what do we ask for?
Right,
right.
I don't remember, like, and that was changing too, Some people were saying one thing, other people were saying other things, and then some of us were saying, well, what was the original thing, and let's stick with that so we don't get confused. So I think for me, as I became educated, I realized how uneducated I was about the process and about what our needs actually were.
Yeah. I want to come back to that in a little bit because I think part of our conversation tonight that Scott and I want to have with you guys is about how to organize and how to be better advocates. And that was the thing that I heard from teachers when I kind of spoke to the crowd. I came off, and those of you guys who know Reagan Kalaki from Memorial, I came off the stage and he was like, hey, thanks, man. I'm so pissed at OEA. And, Reagan never pulls punches on things. And so I got to talk to him and then a few other teachers that heard and like chimed in about like, what are we asking for and where are we? And that was the case because some folks said we need 50 million and some folks said we need 800 million. That's a bit of a range.
Some people said we needed $1.5 billion.
Right, yeah. And so like messaging is a key thing. The legislature's not great about messaging on their end. Optics are not their strong suit. Homie like making Facebook Live videos from the floor. That's I texted Eccles that night of like, you've got a full-time job just trying to keep people off the news, don't you?
Yeah.
What I was thinking, she said that because when it sounds, do you think the OEA was as amazed as everybody else by the number of people who actually walked out?
Yeah.
And if anyone's here from the
Right.
So there
Right.
it was running on the rumor mill, and
Right.
it was putting people in bad. I know the teachers got caught in some story.
Right.
So I thought, I just thought of that because I thought.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you,
Never dreamed that they would.
No,
I
they
think
were
you're right.
ecstatic and also terrified.
right. I mean, and to offer a little bit of like, I don't even want to say like a defense, because as Andy can attest, I, as an outsider kind of watching this, was very frustrated by some of the things. But, when you think about it, you've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, traditional news sources, everybody kind of has a place that they go. Some people rely on Twitter for their news. Some people rely on Facebook for their news. Some people rely on their email. Some people it can be very, very difficult, to try and coordinate a message.
Not everything you read online is true.
Right. It's extreme.
Just
Right. It
be
is.
surprised.
It is just functionally really, really difficult to coordinate a message, and unless you have practice coordinating a message for 40 or 50,000 people, it's really, really easy for that to get lost, because this Facebook group said we're doing this, and this Twitter thread said we're doing this, and this Facebook group said we're doing this, but the news said that this is what we should be asking for, and so it's kind of easy for that to get lost.
We discovered at Memorial High School the old-fashioned way of just putting up a whiteboard and writing on it. I don't know if any of you saw that whiteboard, but people stopped and took pictures of it. I went to the OEA every day and asked, "Would you guys please put out a whiteboard and just write on it?" And I was told, "We'll take that into
Right.
consideration."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, I think OEA and everyone else was
Yeah.
drinking from the fire hose, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of stuff, and that's why we're having things like this to kind of consolidate information.
With all the internet, with all the stuff we do that's so great, sometimes just going down to the basics of writing it on a stinking whiteboard
Right.
is enough.
Yeah.
So messaging, we've had messaging, not being able to keep up with what's changing. What else?
It felt like they kind of dangled this carrot and then they took it all away. And that's really frustrating as someone who will have children in education and who work for higher ed, to see that they made those promises and then took them back.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you said, are you talking specifically about with
They
the
passed the bill to repeal
hotel motel?
hotel motel. Then I read yesterday or the day before that they've reassigned some of the dollars to the general
Gas
fund.
tax?
Yeah.
We're gonna come back to that.
Yeah. And
Do we want to do that?
let's do that right now.
Okay.
So it's really easy to get really upset about the wrong thing, not on purpose, right? Social media plays into this, and a lot of things have face validity that it looks like it's bad, and it takes time to read into it and understand the larger arc of what's happening to understand that maybe it's not as bad as it first seems.
Yeah. Yeah. So the gas tax bill is one that's been really blowing up this week. It's been on mainstream news. It's been on social media. So for those who maybe haven't heard, when they passed 1010XX, which was the funding mechanism for all of the education, this included a 3-cent tax on gas and a 6-cent tax on diesel. And this was kind of understanding that this was going to fund all of these, or in part, raises, textbooks, support staff, those sorts of things. Well, the legislature this week has said that starting in the next fiscal year, the money from the gas tax will flow into the Roads and Bridges Fund and be dedicated to transportation. That is what's being reported. Which is true, but what's not being reported, or at least not at the same level, is that right now there's a bunch of income tax money that is going into that fund that isn't really supposed to. The gas tax is what's supposed to go in there. When the gas tax goes into roads and bridges next year, income taxes will come out dollar for dollar. So the money will still be there. Now, it's not going to be earmarked for education. And you can have a really robust debate about whether or not it should be earmarked for education or not. There's arguments, I think, in favor of that. There's arguments that would go against it, and that's a robust debate that we can have. But the money, assuming that nothing else changes, the money will be there. But not to slam on our local media, but saying they're doing a dollar for dollar swap is not nearly as click-worthy as legislature's taking money away from education that they just passed. Go.
Was the gas tax earmarked for education?
It-
Or was it
Not technically.
Not technically.
Yeah.
We felt like it was, but not
Right.
technically. So
That's
so
what when
Right.
That, I mean, because we were there, like, in the house when it happened.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They said, like, they were going back and forth on it, and they were like, none of it was earmarked for education.
Right.
It was all
Right.
general fund money.
Right.
Which is
Essentially,
correct.
they're raising money because the state needs lots of money if we want it to be where we want it to be, which means we got to pay more money for it, right? You know,
Right.
just so everyone understands that, like, we may want our state to do lots of great things, and that means we have to pay for that. There's a lot of folks that are like, we want teacher raises and more textbooks and nice roads and all these things, but I don't want to pay anymore. I'm like, that doesn't work out, right? And so we've got to pay for it. And so they raised revenue,
Right.
and they also raised expenses and education. And so wherever the money comes from, it goes out. So like it's like if what I said yesterday is, if you and your spouse both work and you have paychecks that come into your house, and let's say you've been paying electric bill and they've been paying the gas bill, and then you decide to switch, nothing changes, right? Like where it comes from and where it goes changes, but it doesn't really matter. And that's a rough approximation of what happened. They like having things to do with roads, fund things to do with roads, because that makes sense. So like
Yeah.
gas tax, roads go together, okay. It was kind of switched in the first place, but moving forward they want to make it so that when they try to change things in future years, they know what it's coming from and where it goes. So that actually helps us next year and the year after that and 10 years from now, remember where the money's coming from and what it goes towards in a little simpler way.
Yeah.
The legislators all knew this.
Yeah, and this was
Yeah.
not
Nobody else.
right.
knew that.
That was
No.
something that was always going to happen. It just wasn't talked about.
Right.
Timing probably wasn't
Yeah.
real.
And the other thing that I would throw in there too that I feel like is important to have with this discussion is that I think you can make a really strong case from a policy standpoint that it's actually much better to fund core services like education, healthcare, mental health from a source like income tax that tends to be much more stable and much more predictable as opposed to something like the gas tax or honestly even gross production taxes on oil, natural gas, other kinds of energy that are inherently volatile and kind of subject to more market fluctuations than income taxes. So
Yeah.
I think as a policy, education actually is coming out ahead, even though what's being reported is that it's like
Well, and the rep from Chickasha, can't remember his name.
Perryman.
Yes, he did. I felt like in the debate he was doing it so that we would all hear that was what was happening. Because he was like, "I'm going to vote for this, but let's get
Right,
what's
right,
happening."
right.
And so it was like a debate to try to help us understand.
Yeah.
But the guy responding to questions just kept saying, "Road money to roads," and like I'm cleaning up the books. Like he just kept giving the same.
Yeah, they
answer,
do that a lot.
makes them seem like they're not telling the truth.
Right. Like I said earlier, they're not great with optics.
Particularly Representative Wallace is not
Like
great.
they could have made this change later, not the week after the walkout, right? Like when everyone's paying attention. That's just
other
idiots.
other frustrations,
Yeah,
other
what
things that maybe didn't go as well as you hoped. Or,
I'll say something. I was at the walkout in 1990 also, and the thing that after everything, all the dust had settled on this one, and I told some of my younger colleagues that hadn't been there, you know, if they would have given us everything that we wanted 3 days into the walkout, that would be 1990. We got what we wanted 2 or 3 days out, and then we didn't get anything else for this many years. This has stirred up because it was on the news for 9 days. Now my neighbors who don't have any kids in school understand there's a problem with public education in Oklahoma, and we're ready to help take care of that. We're ready to get out and vote and do something, do our part. I talked to one of my doctors the other day, and he's like, I had no idea it was as bad as it is, but when you get national news for 9 days and other states that are, I had former students who are teaching in other states that were, you know, messaging me and saying, hey, keep going, you're making it easier for us to do the same thing. A guy that's in Arizona, former students who are now teachers who are walking with us, and you know, we could have done that for 3 days and they gave it to us, and then it would have been done, and we would have thought, we won, and they would have been patting themselves on the back, we're the heroes. The bottom line is, we found out, or I found out, my eyes were open that there are a bunch of idiots sitting up there. They're not nearly as smart as the guys we talked to in 1990, who would stand there and say, here's the bottom line. This is one view, this is another view. I got to go this way. And we're like, well, I'm sorry, I hate to, I'm disappointed in you and all of that. But the bottom line was they could prove why they were going that other way. And these guys a lot of times didn't even know what, like if you rattled off a number of a bill, they were like, well, which one is that? They, they hadn't done their homework. They didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And they got on social media and made fools of themselves, which
They do that a lot too.
mouse forward, that's the kind of stuff that was revealed by us being down there.
Yeah.
So, the walkout ended, and some people felt defeated, but really, there's a bigger win to be had down the road that can go for years and years to come. That I think is going to come out of that. We survived that part, but now, we got to get to the polls and we got to support the pro-education candidates and that kind of stuff. And then maybe they'll take a look year after year after year about what they can do for education.
Yeah. So I think that's exactly right. I'm going to actually clap for you.
Yeah.
Because go Huskies, right? Because right. So the threat of the walkout is what prompted them to vote on everything, right? They were like, oh man, we don't want this to happen. Quick, pass.
Throw some crap together.
Right.
Take it back.
Yeah. So it's like, so they passed it, and they were like, whew, all right, we avoided that. And the teacher said, nope. And so they showed up. You guys showed up and said, no, like, thanks for that. That's cool, but it's not enough. Like, we need more. This is what we need. And and that's the part that like made it stick. And that's the part that inspires the next generation. That's the part that will make change 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's the part that inspires candidates to run right now and let you know that, like, if you're running and you get elected, you got to know what's going on because everyone else is holding you accountable, and that you can't be someone who just is like a bootmaker who decided to run for office. That, like, you got to have some chops and you got to like research things, and it's a hard job for not much money, but you're used to that because you're teachers. And so that's right. Yeah.
As public school teachers, we have to answer to parents and children and grandparents and our principals and our assistant principals and other teachers because we have PLC meetings that last forever, and we've got, and nothing really ever gets done.
Right.
Well, maybe sometimes yours do. I don't know, but I thought to myself, to me, being in public office to me is no different than being in the classroom because I have to answer to everybody anyway. I might as well just do it like I normally do every single day. How many emails do I have to respond to John's mom about him bringing something to class?
Sure.
It's the same thing I do every day.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that also highlights the responsibility that we have as constituents, that it's unreasonable to expect our legislators to be experts on everything, right? You can't be a tax policy expert and an oil and gas engineer and know about feral hogs and Monsanto corn stuff and what's that?
They do it all in 12 years.
Right.
Interim limit of 12 years.
They are.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
12 limited term years
come back
between
to that.
the House and the Senate.
And that's
Yeah.
fine, because not everybody in my classroom is a math genius. But
Right.
we all work together as a
Right.
community to make a classroom.
Yeah.
So why not put somebody who is a public school teacher in the House or Senate so that we can do what's best for students and teachers because that's what we do.
Yeah.
Sure.
I
Right.
mean, it doesn't make any
That's why
sense.
we got to get teachers
Right.
elected.
Yeah.
This is where though this
Read the jargon and know what it means. Like the one they're working on right now. I'm like, why would you do that? Why do you have to have 3 levels of teaching and pay a member? It doesn't make any sense.
well, and
very
so
important.
this highlights how important effective advocacy is, and one thing that makes advocacy effective is that it occurs regularly, right? Like that it occurs constantly. So kind of put this in perspective. The first session of the 56th legislature, so this was last year, roughly 2,000 bills were introduced, okay? This session, about another 2,000 were introduced. They'll ultimately pass probably somewhere around 450 to 500 bills. But these are 4,000 bills dealing with everything from education to healthcare to feral hogs to oil and gas to engineering to roads and bridges. No one person.
Sunscreen
Yeah,
on
right.
kids.
There were like 4 sunscreen bills this year, y'all. Like 4, okay? Yeah. no one can be an expert in all of this stuff. And I don't know, you guys had this experience, I'm sure, last week, or maybe you didn't because you might not be as married to the West Wing as I am from the late 90s, early 2000s. I had this vision before I went to the Capitol that the legislators were like, in their offices surrounded by like staffers and policy experts and people like kind of educating them and talking about it and debating. Like, no, right? Like, no. 9 times out of 10, they will vote on a bill and they may not hear advocacy on it from anyone, but if they do, it's probably a lobbyist, which is not necessarily a dirty word, a lobbyist who works for the bill's sponsor. So if that's the only information that they get, and like, I don't know anything about feral hogs, I don't live in southwestern Oklahoma, but this guy says this is a good bill and nobody says otherwise, so all right, I'll vote for it. That's how a lot of this happens. But if you as a constituent call and say, I'm a teacher and this education bill that you're working on is terrible or great, as the case may be, that goes a long way. If you've ever heard that 4, 5, 6 phone calls, emails, or letters to your legislator makes a huge difference, 7 is the magic number.
7 touches will change a bill.
The reason that number is so low is because no one talks to them.
So State Senator Stephanie Bice, just west of here, we were friends before she ever ran for office. And after her first year, what's that? Are we still? It's different. I will admit, we're still friends, but it's different. And as it would be if I ran, I'm sure. But after her first year, I asked her, like, do you have people calling you all the time? And she said she only heard from like, I think 13 of her constituents throughout the whole first year, of people who lived in her district that cared about things a whole year, only 13 people. And I was like, I kind of laughed. She's just like, no, I'm serious. People that live in my area never call. And I was like, oh my God, okay. So we've got some work to do in like getting involved, and that's the thing. So that even if you disagree, and I shared this morning, I used to live in House District 100. Elise Hall is the rep. She's not running for re-election. And she and I disagree on most policies. Not all, but most.
What's one that you agree on?
I don't remember, but because I'm guilty. Confession, like I tend to only call when I disagree, and I realized that this year I need to do better about calling when I agree, and so that squirrel attacks me. I swear to God. And so we were in Target a few weeks ago. I was walking through Target, and Representative Hall said, "Hi, Andy." I said, "Hi, Elise." And like that's when you know that you're a good advocate, is when your rep recognizes you in the grocery store and says hello. They're not afraid to say hello, so it means I wasn't a jerk. She knows we disagree, that's fine, but she always answers my calls. She responds to my emails, my tweets, whatever, and she'll explain why she votes however she votes. And I get that in that district, she's probably voting with the majority of her constituents, and I'm in the minority, okay. But I still did my part to make it known so that she knows. Someday, it could be an issue where I'm in the majority, and I want to let her know that like that's what I support. And so I was glad that she said hello, and that's fine, and we can move on. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, how much power or sway do the lobbyists have? I always hear about people, lobbyists own the legislature. The women.
Right.
How much sway do they have compared to constituents?
A lot. A lot.
Yeah. So we'll probably give a couple of answers to this. So when this first started, a state rep said to me that the legislature cares about 2 things: money and influence. I don't have money. And I didn't have influence, but hey, look, people showed up to a bar on a Monday night, so like that's starting to help. Also, because you're teachers, you have influence, and they're starting to recognize that even if one teacher comes in, that's one teacher with a bunch of teachers behind them, right, every time. So they understand that. And so whatever it is you have to offer holds some sway. Now, to go back to the money thing, there are some members, not all, but some members of the legislature who have received hefty donations from certain industry groups, like oil and gas, right? A lot of folks,
and wind, honestly.
And
like,
wind, and
I mean, there's lots of them.
Yeah, and lots of random things. It's
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. A lot of groups that lobby and spend money and buy Thunder tickets and all of that. There's also a lot of folks out there, millions of Oklahomans, who don't spend $1 on supporting people. And so I would encourage you, if you have a candidate that you support, or someone that's in office that you really like, then it's not necessarily bad to show it with money. You don't have to give them like $1,000, but I mean, giving them $10 puts you on that donor list. And if we're looking at a big list of names, that's different. And so there is that. Also, most of the people that I know in legislature have a conscience, and they know that they're honestly, they probably are more afraid of what would happen against them than what happens for them. So anecdotally, some of those stories I've heard is that, members of leadership may have promised things for a donation of $10,000, which honestly is not that much money. Like, I don't know that I would sell my soul for $10,000. 10 million? Maybe. No, but just kidding. But I mean, it's not that much money. And so for them to know, like, they're more afraid of having attack ads. They're more afraid of people running against them. They're more afraid of whatever than it is of what they're getting for it. And so what matters most, money aside, is the person in their doorway who looks them in the eye and asks them, why did you vote this way? Why did you vote against this? Do you support this? Why? Why not? Like, what does that mean? And if you do that, and you hold them accountable, because the lobbyists don't actually vote for them, right? Unless they live in their district, which is, they only get one vote.
And they are aware of the fact that, by and large, the lobbyists, while they may support them, are not their constituents. Greg, do you want?
I was just going to say that I'm planning on reaching out to our group and finding people like you or whoever else that are in office for a little bit of time. We know we're going to be there, and like to people who want to make like $25 donations and give them, bundle them, come together and see him, and then start going to fundraisers and participating in the presence. So yeah. Put that out there for people that are interested. So I'm going to piggyback on that real quick, Dana. So before all this, I didn't ever donate. I didn't go to any fundraisers, and now I've had some friends that have like hosted fundraisers at their house. I'll show up whether I donate or not. There's usually free food, and it's a chance to talk to that person, and I want to talk to him before I give him any money. Like, I'm like, who are you? What do you stand for? Why should I vote for you? First. If you donate money, it doesn't matter whether you're big or small. You're part of that.
Yeah.
Right. You have a voice. Yeah.
So all of us, it's just like the last couple of cycles where small donations. The new senator from California announced today that she wasn't taking any super PAC money.
Yeah.
So she's gonna have to get the money another way.
Can I also just say I had an existential crisis just now because it's been 18 years since Greg Oppel was my AP US teacher. And and I think this might be the first time I ever called him Greg, and it still felt weird.
Dana?
Well, one of the things I was thinking about, because you were talking about some of us who've been here and are older, that happened after the last time. We got our money, we did good, and we went back to our jobs. I hope that one of the things comes out, and I came to Edmond as the
Transition. Yeah, I think we're at that point.
Do you want to do this?
and one of our
I would just go to that.
frustrations was engaged in the process. And so I hope that one of the outcomes of this is that you continue to advocate, and you don't just advocate for yourself. That was one of the things I loved that Liz said yesterday. You know, a lot of the teachers, the majority of the teachers are women. There's other women issues. Help them with those issues. I heard some people complain because senior day got canceled. Well, help the seniors. You know, because we have to continue to pursue. You can't just go home and you keep being there and you keep knocking on doors. It's just not one and out or one and go home. And I think that that's unfortunately what happened before, because they thought everything was great. You cannot leave the Capitol and expect everything to be great.
Yeah.
They'll whittle them away, as we all know, the next day.
Yeah.
So if what I heard in Kenny Williams is the one who was the back, she just died, a wonderful person from Tulsa, and she was one of the co-authors, I think, of House Bill 2. And she said there's none of it left because the legislators over here, as it turned to a different party, it began to get torn up.
So that
And that was one of the high points for me. We gave donuts, and there were so many Edmond teachers that walked through after. I was going to have my husband pick me up about 2 blocks down. But we gave you donuts, and then we went to the other end. But, I mean, there was a lot of wonderful things, but that's the one thing is I just hope that the Edmond teachers and educators, and you might explain a little bit about how they can advocate.
Yeah.
that's
That's a good point.
literally what's coming next.
Sure.
It's
Good job, Dana.
the perfect transition.
Thing about that, I felt like even while we were there, they were trying to pit community services against
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, they
So
do
to
that.
try to say, well, we can give you money, but then mental health and prisons won't get anything. And I was like, hey, I take that
Right.
personally because
That's the point I was going to make just now.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's we're on the same wavelength there. That is exactly the next point I was going to make is that, hey, listen, we're all Oklahomans, right? And I don't know a teacher out there that thinks that we should give the shaft to criminal justice, we should give the shaft to healthcare. No, it's going to take all of us rising up together and saying, raise education funding. And they're like, okay, we did that. All right, great. We're still here. Raise healthcare funding. And they're like, okay, fine. Okay, now let's talk about criminal justice. And together, like as Oklahomans, we can fix this state. I call this Let's Fix This for a reason. It's really easy. It's right there. Like, let us fix this. Like, let's do it. And we've got to get together. And the better that we organize our message, the better that we organize ourselves, the better we're going to make this state. And it's not going to happen overnight, right? Rome was not built in a day. Oklahoma was not built in a day. We're going to get there. Well, it's true. But there were some cheaters. Yeah, sure. That's all right. But I mean, we can do this. It's not that hard. It's not even rocket science. It's just law. Like, there are books about this. We've been doing it for thousands of years. We can make this happen. And so I really believe that the fact that thousands of people are paying attention now who have tuned out for years is going to be a huge factor. The thing that matters is it's going to start with the election in June, right? Everyone know the primary is in June 26. So a website you should go to right now, I'll let you cheat on your phones, ok.turbovote.org. You can sign up for free election reminders. Super easy. They don't spam you. They send you like 2 messages before every election for which you're eligible. You put in your address and all that so they know which city council, which school board, which county offices that you have. They'll send you a text like 3 weeks in advance and then maybe 2 days in advance. Yes, ma'am.
Turbovote.org.
Org.
Yeah.
One important thing, we won't publicly shame anyone here, and I'm sure we don't have anyone here who's not registered to vote, but should there be someone here who's not registered to vote, June 1st. If you're going to vote on June 26th, and everybody should, June 1st is the last day that you can register. I'm sure I know all of us have friends that aren't registered to vote. That's one of the main things you can be doing for the next 6 weeks. Get your friends who aren't registered to vote by June 1st so they can vote in the June 26th primaries.
Yeah.
For asking. So thank you.
You're welcome. Something else that I've seen on social media that's super awesome, in my opinion, is school districts that are looking at closing for election day.
That's fantastic.
We would all love to see like it be a national holiday, right? What's that?
We asked that with Mr. Town last week at the meeting, and they said they were looking at it.
Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Push it. Bring
Look
it up.
at it, do it. It's super simple.
Send emails on the weekends. Push for it, because if teachers keep pushing for it, the schools can shut down the state. Like we saw that. Keep pushing. I would love to see that. Right. You all get 2 hours, or you can all vote regardless. There's a way to get around that. Yeah. And but show up to vote. If you can take a personal day or whatever, let's make it a party. We can meet for tacos. I'd love to meet you. It's cool. That's what I like to do. Taco Tuesday. Even better, if you want to volunteer at a polling place and you're under the age of 95, that would be terrific. I would love to see a bunch of like young people up there so that when I go to vote, I'm like going to see Scott and I are in the same district. We're not the same precinct, but it'd be cool to be like, what's up, like high five, and then cast my ballot and go have tacos while he's at the ballot box. But I think have you ever been to vote where you knew the people there because they were remotely close to your age. I've voted in several states, and that's not because I live there, not just, they're retired, they have more time.
He's the voter fraud Trump keeps talking about.
And they're patriotic. But why can't we? Right? I got some PTO I could use. I'm patriotic. I could show up to vote. I kind of want to volunteer at the ballot box this year. I need to find out what it takes. And I'll post selfies all day long if I have to.
Couple other, this date has already passed, so if you are already registered to vote, you cannot change your party at this point and change which party's primary you're going to vote in. So in Oklahoma, Democrats and independents can vote in the Democratic Party primary. Republicans only can vote in the Republican primary, and libertarians
Vote in the Libertarian
can
primary.
vote in the Libertarian primary, but only libertarians, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's too late to change your party, but regardless of your party affiliation, show up and vote on the 26th of June. Remember, everybody is talking about Remember in November, which is super important, but the choices that you have in November are determined by the choices that are made in June.
See you soon in
So,
June.
see you soon in June, all right? If you want good choices in December or November, you got to vote in June.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a very elementary question.
That's okay.
There's only one candidate in our party. Do we still go vote in the primary?
No.
No,
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
think so. I just wanted to verify.
that is not an unreasonable question at all.
it's different this year, and our candidates in our midst know this, that we had more people file for office this year than we've had, I think, ever. Which is,
794?
Yeah, almost 800 people. And also today, if you watched online, like there were some of the challenges are being heard today, where they challenged Attorney General Mike Hunter of his residency and all that. It was kind of an interesting, kind of ridiculous,
It's very entertaining.
very entertaining hearing. And I didn't even know that you could challenge someone's candidacy. I learned something new today. So, so part of the deal with primaries, particularly in Oklahoma for Republican primaries, is that there are a number of seats and offices that have 2 or more Republican candidates and no other parties. So the primary election will very likely decide who wins that seat. Right? There might be a runoff, but maybe not. And that person wins, and that means that Democrats and independents didn't get a vote in it whatsoever. So there is a movement. There are some people, Scott and I are 2 of them, kind of pushing for to open up primaries. This idea is not entirely popular with everybody. I get it. I like it, and so I'm voting. I'm pushing it. But it would allow for primaries, and this will take
A couple of years.
a couple of years and a lot of money to be a constitutional amendment to allow everyone to vote in every primary. And you can just vote for the person you like the best, that you think is the best, regardless of your party, their party. You're a gentleman. Thank you.
Do what I can.
And so, that's in the future. So Dana had a comment earlier about what teachers and public employees can do.
Yeah.
Do we have any, aside from teachers, any public, like state employees here, by the way? Hello, Ava. There's a Let's Fix This board member, Ava Doyle. Hello. So some rules that you guys probably know but might not. This is somewhat elementary, but it's worth covering. Teachers, public employees, I think we get the vibe that we should not have a political opinion about things, and we should just lay low and take it, right? Like that's pretty much it. Like just take your salary and that's it. And you can't speak up, and that's not the case. You can be as involved as you want to be if you're not on the clock and you're not using state or school district resources. And this is one of those things that can get touchy, and if you're like me, I'd rather just be ethical to a fault, because I'd rather be above reproach so that no one is calling me to some kind of weird hearing in the Senate, right? Like what happened today. So if you work for a school district, you can certainly vote, you can donate, you can host fundraisers, you can go to the Capitol, you can do whatever you want, as long as you're not on the clock and you're not using school resources.
Can't use your school email address, for instance. You can't use your school email address to be advocating for a candidate, advocating for a bill. On your lunch hour, I guess I already dated myself. Do schools have Wi-Fi now? Like that wasn't a thing when I was in high school.
That's a good question.
Right? I was just gonna be like, don't tweet from the school's Wi-Fi network while you're on your lunch hour. But I was like, I assume they have Wi-Fi. They didn't when I was there. But so even it's like, right?
When it works.
So right. So like don't be, even if it's on your personal social media account, don't be on your computer in your classroom. I assume that is a thing too. Don't be on your computer in your classroom on Twitter or Facebook posting political advocacy while you're at work or for a candidate. Those sorts of things.
Same things. What's that? You can
You
put
can
signs
absolutely
in your
put
yard.
signs in your yard.
Yeah, yeah. You can do whatever you want on your own time. You can wear T-shirts. You can headscarves, banners, whatever you want to do on your own time. Not T-shirts at school. Right. Good point.
One thing that you can do, and we heard this alluded to someone, I forgot who it was that said it. You can absolutely invite legislators to come speak to your class. You can absolutely do that, and your students can ask them anything they want. I mean, like respectfully, of course, right? But like you can have them come to your class. They don't have to come, but you can ask them to come, and they can talk to your class, and your students can ask them hard questions that they might not hear from anyone else. That's 100% allowed.
And as we're kind of transitioning into a discussion about how to do advocacy, and so for right now, for the legislature, things are about done, right? Like it's not entirely done, but in the next couple of weeks, they are planning, as they do every year, they're planning to wrap things up with the ed budget out of the way. They're hoping to be done in the next 2 weeks. We'll see, but it looks like it might happen for real
They
this
say
year.
it literally every year, and it literally never happens. But
And so I think it's worth having a conversation that our focus needs to pivot and start looking at candidates, start building relationships with candidates. So look, I need to post it tonight or tomorrow. I'll put it on our website, letsfixthisok.org. There's a resources tab, and I'll put a spreadsheet on there. I think the state chamber is the one that put it out, but it's got all the candidates, and I'm working to get all their websites and Facebook pages and all that stuff and put it up there so that we can go find out information about candidates. Judges are tough. Everyone's like, what about the judges? I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, you can't force them to make a website.
Right.
That's just bad form, but I'll find them. I'll Google them. If you Google them and find something, email me, and I'll put it up there. And we can try to work together and crowdsource this stuff. But start meeting with candidates, especially as the legislature ends and they move towards sine die, sine die. They mispronounce it I don't know. I don't speak Latin. But as they move towards the end, they're all going to start campaigning. Everyone who's running for office is campaigning. Candidates are here. Look at hosting stuff in your neighborhood. So in my Senate district, 2 of the candidates that are running, there's several, but 2 of them live about a block apart, and I live like 2 blocks over. We're all in the same street, and I want to have a cookout in the front yard and invite all of our neighbors and be like, y'all come down, let's have a cookout and meet the candidates. If I can get 10 or 12 neighbors to hang out, we'll all cook burgers or hot dogs or Boca burgers or whatever you got, and have it in our neighborhood. They'll come because anyone who's willing to host a cookout for candidates is probably a very engaged voter who might have influence or money, and they will show up. Am I right, candidates?
Yep.
Could you invite
Right, yeah.
multiple candidates to that?
Yeah, I'll invite them all. Come
Sure.
on down.
Sure.
I want to know all of them. I don't know some of them, so let's find out.
You know your neighborhood association representative, having that annual meeting. That's a good place. That's a good venue.
Great place to start.
Send out an invitation.
Right.
Yeah. And I would even piggyback what Andy is saying, that this doesn't have to, this kind of getting to know the candidates does not have to happen only in elections that are super competitive. Let's say you live in a district that is overwhelmingly Democratic. Let's say that you are a Republican and there's a Republican running, but a Democrat has held this seat for about 80 years and is probably going to hold it next January. Get to know that Democrat who's going to potentially win that seat. The legislature at its core is nothing more than a community of people, and it functions the way any other community of people functions, which is largely off of relationships. And so if you want to influence that community, you need to have relationships with the people that are a part of it. So even if you're representative or you're a senator, maybe they're not facing a competitive election, they're sure to be reelected, maybe they're not even facing an opponent, this next 6 months when they're not actively at the Capitol, working on bills, having meetings, talking to advocacy groups. This next 6 months is a great time to build that relationship so that next February, when you walk in the first week of February, which you're going to do because you're all going to be engaged advocates, right? You're going to walk in the first week of February, and then your state senator says, oh, hey, Ashley, or hey, Greg, hey, Andy. They know you because you've gotten to know them the last 6 months. You've talked about their kids, you've talked about their dog, what they like to do when they're not being at the Capitol. Those taking time to get to know those details about your representatives really will go an astonishingly long way to letting you have more influence when it comes to policy.
Yeah, so to echo what Scott said, so my background's in mental health. I'm a licensed therapist, and I'm a professional relationship builder, right? Like, do marriage counseling. So the legislature isn't that different, right? Two people who don't get along, let's make them get along. And so part of that is, it's about helping them remember, whether it's a couple or it's the legislators, helping them remember why they did this in the first place, right? Like, what are those stories? Why did they fall in love with this thing in the first place? I don't know anyone who ran for office that was like, I want to burn it all down, this is terrible. Just like no one got married because that person's a huge jerk and I hate them.
John Bennett?
Maybe, but he's not running again. So,
it's true.
But so have those conversations.
It's true.
Ask them why they ran for office, and don't ask them because you want to play gotcha. Like, ask them because you want to know, right? Like, they probably had a story like this where they were at some kind of community forum and they thought, you know what, I could do this. I want to run for office. Like, some of them were teachers, or they have kids that are in school or whatever. They want to make a difference in their community. Well, on that point, you can find some common ground. Even if you disagree on the philosophy behind it, the point you both are Oklahomans. That we're all Oklahomans, and regardless of the D or the R or the I or the L or whatever letter after there, like, we're all OKLAHOMA, Oklahoma. like that's like, there's something that connects all of us. And for the last 100 and whatever years, the land that we live on has been trying to throw us off, right? Between the Dust Bowl and tornadoes and earthquakes, everything we have, and we're stubborn as hell and we're sticking it out. So we got to find a way to live together. And we got to find a way to govern that makes sense, that is respectful of one another, and to ask them, to engage them in those conversations, and to be willing to sit there and hear them say things that you disagree with, and to say, okay, I hear you. I understand now why you believe that. And here's what I think you should do.
Yeah,
and then,
right.
But have
Here's
that
why you're
conversation.
wrong.
Right. Because you don't want people coming in your office telling you how to do your business and run things and why you're wrong on everything. But if they start off by asking questions and trying to, heaven forbid, be their friend a little bit, you're going to get a lot farther. And so advocacy for us starts with that relationship. It starts with the person that recognizes you in Target. We're not big rally people. I mean, it's awesome when there's 50,000 people at the Capitol, right? But marching around outside the Capitol, if you've got, less than 50,000, is not as impactful, right? On any given Sunday, there's a group of people up at the Capitol having a rally, and no one else is there. And unless you drive by, you don't know what's happening. And I always wonder, what the hell are you doing? That's what a way to spend a Sunday that's not going to move the needle at all.
Yeah.
But if you're there on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in your legislator's office, hanging out, waiting for them to arrive for work, and then saying, hey, good to see you, thanks for being here, I want to talk to you for 5 minutes about education funding, you might have a chance in moving that needle a little bit.
I think another thing that's really important to try and be an effective advocate is understanding that these are, for the most part, especially during session, they're really, really busy people. They have a lot of, especially when there's 50,000 of you, they have a lot of people that are asking for their time. They have a lot of people that are wanting to talk to them. And it could be that there's 25 people that want to talk to them today, and they're all from different industries. They're talking about different bills, completely different subject matter. Oh, and in between then, they have to go to the House and take votes on a couple dozen bills or so, or they've got to go to committee. So one of the ways that you can be respectful of their time is to go in and be very specific about what it is you're talking to them about. And so it's really important that when you talk, you know what you're asking for, right? That you understand the details of what you're asking for and understanding what's possible. Right now, with supposedly 2 weeks left in session, there's not a lot that's possible. There's not a lot to advocate for, although as of 4 o'clock today, they're still passing disastrous bills. So there's still things going on. But another really good thing to do in the next 6 months, when they're not in session every day, this is a time when we can educate ourselves about some of those things that weren't clear during the walkout. What is the process? Like, what's the committee process? What's the process for a bill being introduced? How does the budget work? How is education actually funded? What are they going to do when they come back? In terms of resources that you can use, probably most of you are by now familiar with Oklahoma policy. If you're not, okpolicy.org. It's what we use consistently. We use it on our podcast. We use it when we're trying to educate ourselves. They are, in my opinion, the single best resource for how a lot of these things work. Every year at the beginning of session, they put out a legislative primer. It's not short. It's about 50 pages, but it's 50 pages that are easy to read, and if you are a political junkie, absolutely riveting. So that's a great thing to check out. They put out fact sheets. They put out weekly updates. They have a great weekly email called the Weekly Wonk that if you kind of wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of some of these policies, any bill of consequence that's moving through the legislature, Oklahoma policy will have a fact sheet, an article, or a statement. And they're nonpartisan, they're a nonprofit. It's very much like, here's the bill, here's what it does, here's how this would impact services in the state. If you really want to kind of take it to the next level, they have an online budget guide. It is neither short nor easy reading, but you guys are teachers, right? Like, so it's...
Or if you want to take it to the even next level, just listen to our podcast.
There's that.
And we'll try to explain it to you.
Our podcast, so it's called Let's Pod This.
Let's pause this.
Yes, it's very on brand.
It's just, yeah.
You had your hand up. What do you want to say?
Yeah, so when you're talking about us, like, continuing to go talk to people about things this spring, I'm a Democrat in a deep red area, and talking about what are we going to do when we come back, and I don't want to give them the impression that, like, it's a given that they're coming back.
Sure.
So how would you recommend we frame that sort of thing?
So if you're asking an incumbent, say if you're reelected, just that kind of question, which you should ask to every candidate. Like, if you are elected, what are you going to do about X? And having that's a really great question. Did I answer yet? Okay.
And I would say
If you're elected.
yeah, and if you were reelected, but I would also say that if you're kind of asking like, what do you do before next spring? I think particularly when you're talking to a legislator with whom you're not going to agree very much on policy. Probably the best example I have of this was actually the very first time I went to the Capitol. It was the very first day of Let's Fix This. It was 2 years ago. So I went, and I am fortunate to live in a district where my legislator and I agree on most things. And so I wound up talking to a guy from the opposite party. He's very, very, very conservative guy. He's from one of the rural communities. And I went to his office, and we spent the first hour talking about his grandkids and like where he's from and what his life. And he asked if, do I have kids and what do I do and what does my wife do? I mean, literally the first hour was just getting to know each other. And then he said, well, so you're here. What were you going to come talk about today? And I said, well, honestly, so when I'm not at the Capitol, I'm a primary care doctor. There were a couple of bills that they've already passed. You voted for them. I would like to know kind of why did you vote for those bills? And he told me, and he said, what do you think? And I said, well, here's why. If I had the chance to talk to you, if I could have been here 2 weeks and talked to you, here's why I would have said, kind of from my perspective with what I do for a living, why these are not good for Oklahomans. And this guy, who is in the leadership, is one of the most conservative members of the House, looked at me and just said, man, nobody had ever talked to me about that before. No one has ever explained that the way that you just talked about it. And I think if I had known that 2 weeks ago, I probably would have voted differently. Now, I don't know that he would have said that if I had just come in and been like, okay, so there were these two bills and they're terrible and you voted for them. What's up?
I don't
you
like
know?
you.
Right.
I mean,
But we
we've heard that a lot in a lot of like the advocacy training, and it's been very humbling to look back on the 9 days we were there and go,
Right.
Do you feel like that's still kind of like in a time of like it was then? I mean, is that irreparable damage?
No,
I don't think so at
not
all.
at all. Not like.
And
not
I've
at
said
all.
like, there have been days when I got texts from members of both parties like on the same day where they were both mad at me, and I felt like I was failing, right? And then I talked to people in the media that were like, "Oh, you're doing the right thing." Like if both sides are mad at you, you're in the middle, and that's why they're mad. And I thought, all right, okay, that made me feel better. And so each House rep represents 38,500 people. Senators represent roughly 70,000 people. You're not going to please all the people all the time, and it's I mean, like I don't agree with my mom all the time, and somehow we've been okay for like 37 years, right? Like, and so being able to say we disagree, I still like you. It's okay. Thanks for your service. Like, thanks for what you do, and to hold them accountable, but also let them know that like they're people too. Just like with students, right? Like you've got that student in your class that just drives you nuts, but you don't give up on them. You may want to sometimes, and there's some days you go home and you're like, I'm gonna have a glass of wine and relax about this guy, but the next day you come back and you think about it and you find some way to dig a little deeper, give a little more. And I think being an advocate, that's part of what it is. It's like, it's a combination of like sales and dating and parenting, like all kind of into one. I don't know the percentage breakdown there, but it's a little bit of all those things. And I think patience goes a long way. And to know that government moves slowly necessarily. Like, as frustrated as it is that we don't progress faster on some things, we don't just fix the budget and do whatever we want them to do, I'm also thankful that they don't move quickly in other ways. Because as quickly as they could build it up, they could tear it down. And that to change the way a whole state moves, there's 4 million people in Oklahoma. There's 50 of us here, and so like, we got it all figured out, right? But like, there are 3.99 million people out there who might disagree with us, and so it takes some time to make that community level change to get folks to understand that like this is the way it is. And so, even as one example, in HIV, there's a state education mandate related to HIV education. So HIV first appeared in America in 1981. Oklahoma's law was written in 1987. A few things have changed since 1987. And for the second year in a row, we were not able to get our bill to update the standards across the finish line. Like, it got really close, and admittedly, it probably didn't get heard this year because of the teacher walkout. I'm okay with that. But like, right, yeah, but it's one of those things where like, we're on the same team on this, right? Like, teachers would like to present maybe accurate, relevant data also. And so, but it's one of those things where like, last year when we did it, it was, the way it was worded was just too much for some people. And while I think that's ridiculous, I get it. If I was trying to get my grandma to get on board, it would take a little more than just one conversation. And so we tried again this year, we got farther. Next year, I think we can get it across the finish line. And if it's way out of date, it's, like 20 years out of date, what's one more year really matter? Okay, like we'll get them there. In the end, if we stick together, if we stay on message, if we organize, if we talk to our neighbors and our districts and our principals and our unions that we have in Oklahoma, and get together on this, we're going to get there.
Yeah. So kind of keeping going with like, how do you advocate effectively? So we've got, right, build relationships, understand that legislators are people too, register to vote, vote in primaries, vote in special elections, vote in the general election, make sure that you're educating yourself on just policy and how policy works. Okay, policy is a great way to do that. Again, shameless plug, Let's Pod This every Thursday. Comes out usually Friday mornings. If this is at all interesting to you, it's a lot of this, except just me and him. And
we have guests.
Yeah, we have guests. Pretty good guests, right?
Decent guests.
Pretty good guests. Ms. Leslie Scrivener is an Oklahoma City public school teacher, was one of our podcast guests leading up to the walkout. So it's another resource that our goal is to basically try and, when there are major bills coming up, when there are major other issues, when there are elections, is to try and break all of it down from the legislative language and the process into a usually 15 to 20 minute segment that's like, this is what's happening. probably the next set of issues that will come even before we get back into session that we're going to do that for, and that would be really great for all of us to kind of educate ourselves on, are the state questions. There are going to be a bunch of state questions. There's some on the primary on the 26th. And there's going to be a bunch in November. We will have a state question guide that we put out. We'll be talking about them on the podcast. OK Policy will have a state question guide. Lots and lots of different advocacy organizations, all with different perspectives, will have state question guides. State questions in Oklahoma are very powerful. They can do things. They can change laws. They can do everything up to and including amending the Constitution, which Andy talked about yesterday.
We love the
We
amend
do
our
that
Constitution
all the time in Oklahoma.
So sorry, cut you off.
Yeah.
When Oklahoma was a state and we passed the Constitution, it was the longest governing document in the world.
Yeah. And we've amended it 150 times since then.
And and we don't amend the U.S. Constitution very often, but in Oklahoma, we loved it because it's so specific. It enumerates the flashpoint of kerosene in case anyone should contest that. It's in there, just to prove a point. And so we have to amend it because we have these obscure things. And so that's why 2 years ago when 779 came up for a vote, which failed, it was the teacher pay raise thing. It was a constitutional amendment. And for a lot of folks, they didn't like the idea of modifying the state constitution over a $5,000 pay raise. Because in 50 years, that $5,000 doesn't mean squat. And so, the fact that we were willing to amend our Constitution, or at least talk about it, is indicative of kind of our distrust of government as a state. So, so state questions are important.
They're important. And when they do things like amend the Constitution, they're really, really hard to go back and undo. So State Question 640, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, is probably what got us in this mess, or at least part of it. That's why we haven't had a tax increase since 1990 in Oklahoma. That's been on the books for almost 30 years because it's real. I mean, there have been at least three proposals in the legislature this session to try and get rid of State Question 640 or change it in some way, and they've all failed. There's trying to be an initiative petition on the ballot in November to undo State Question 640, and that failed. Once these things happen, it's hard to go back and fix them, so it's important that we get it right the first time. So another thing to do between now and January, make sure that we're educating ourselves on the state questions and what they do and what the impact will be.
So I'm going to make one other point and then let's do some questions.
Yeah.
So one other point is going back, looking back over the last 4 years, first let me say, it's easy to say, vote those bums out. And I have two things to say about that. One is you don't ever vote someone out. You just vote for somebody else.
Right.
There's no vote of no confidence. You can't just remove them. So you have to vote for somebody. Secondly, going back, there are term limits of 12 years combined, so you can do 6 and 6 between the two chambers or whatever. 12 years total legislature. The average tenure of a legislator is about 8 years in Oklahoma right now. It was 8 years before there were term limits, then it went up, and now it's 8 years again, kind of back to equilibrium. There's only about 40 people, so less than a third of the legislature that has been there for more than 4 years. Even if everyone wins this year that's incumbents, it'll be 42 people. So most of the folks that were there even 6 years ago are not there anymore. And so part of the problem is we have a lot of new people, no offense to those that are candidates, we have a lot of folks that are new there who haven't figured things out yet. If you only work 4 months a year, it takes you a while to figure out how things work. And so because of that, bear in mind that not everyone's going to win. And we're going to have a whole lot of new freshmen again that'll be elected in November. And so those relationships really do matter. And getting to know them and talk to them as early as you can and build those relationships and get them indoctrinated into whatever it is you care about so that when they take their oath of office and they start filing interim studies and start looking into bills, that they know where their constituency is coming from. So however you can start those relationships, if it's now here at the Patriarch or it's at home next week, that barbecue in the front yard like I'm talking about, I'm telling you, this is the key to democracy right here. Invite me too. I like cookouts. And so that's going to make a huge difference. So All right.
I think that's really
That's
kind of our like little spiel, I guess, in terms of effective advocacy. So
Yeah, we had planned for 2 hours. It's 8 o'clock ish now, 8:10, 8:03. So, open forum. Any questions? We'll make shit up. We answered all the questions. Katie. Oh yes.
yeah, that's a great point.
Right. So my fiance, who's brilliant, this is why I'm marrying her. So yeah. So if you go to the Capitol, the legislator is important. Their LA, their legislative assistant, is arguably more important because they're the gatekeeper of their schedule and everything else. Be nice to them.
Yeah.
They don't always agree with that person either. I have a friend who is a gay man who worked for a very conservative Republican, and it was people would treat him as if he was the legislator, and it's like they couldn't have been more different. That's just a job for him, right? And so he did a great job, and so like you have to build relationships with them, let them know the. So an example I give, I used to live in Senator Irvin Yin's district, in kind of Nichols Hills-ish, middle Oklahoma City, and I was asking him to be on a panel for Social Worker Day at the Capitol. And he was like, oh yeah, call my assistant, see if I'm free that day. So, okay. He said, she used to be a social worker. I was like, noted. So I call, talk to her, and she's like, well, I said, hey, I talked to the senator today, he told me to give you a call about this thing, he'd like to come. She's like, she's thinking, yeah, right, buddy. I don't know who you are. And so she's like, well, I'll check and see, I'll ask him. And I said, no, he told me that you used to be a social worker. And she said, yeah, that's true. And so we had just like a 2-minute conversation about what kind of social work she did, what her experience was. And after 2 minutes, she said, I'll go ahead and pencil him in for that. I was like, yeah, that's right. Because it took me 2 minutes to be like a personal connection with somebody about that. And they have a really terrible job because they answer the phones. So if you're going to call and yell at somebody, you're yelling at them, not the legislator. That's not fair to them. They're just there trying to. So be nice to them. They'll be nice to you, and that wins for democracy.
Robbie?
Is that all the highlights?
All right.
Anything else?
What else? Other questions?
Okay.
So what do you suggest? Should I make it more specific? Should I make one email for each subject that I'm concerned with?
Right.
The generally speaking,
I'm going to restate the question so
Yeah.
everyone can hear. So her question is, when you email your legislator, should it be specific or general? And she said she sends emails that she feels are too general. Scott, go ahead.
I'd say, generally speaking, the more specific you can be, the better. And so honestly, a great example was what a lot of folks were talking about during the walkout. Like kind of like a refrain that we heard a lot was fully fund education, which sounds awesome. But what does that mean? Is that the 1.4 billion that we asked for over 3 years? Is it the 812 million we asked for in the first year? Is it the 500 million less 50 million that we had and then they took away hotel motel? Like, what is fully funding education? So if you phrase it like that, where you're like, I want you to fix this issue, unless it happens to be an issue that your legislator is particularly passionate and knowledgeable about, the first thing that they're going to think is, okay, how do you want me to do that? So if you're emailing somebody that you know, like this is the chair of the House subcommittee on education, and there's a particular bill, and you talk about that, they're going to know if you just reference that. But if you're emailing your senator who doesn't know anything about that bill, and you say, I just think you should support this issue, they're going to say they're going to want more information. Or I shouldn't say they're going to want it, they're going to need more information if they're going to do anything to address your concern. Does that make sense?
So.
I think my frustration was that, we're supposed to give them all the answers. As a citizen,
Right.
I feel it's my job to tell them, hey, this is the problem we're having. You're in a position to where they have access to information, whether
Right.
or not they look for it. He doesn't. He's been there 4
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You are 100% right, and you are 100% justified in your frustration. All
Hoppa!
right.
It's a long train.
We have like one more, right? Like one more horn. We're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I grew up here, y'all. Like I said, you're 100% justified in your frustration, and you're right. I think what they would say, and I would sympathize with them a little bit, is that like just like I'm a primary care doctor, right? So like my job is to know what somebody needs when they come to me for things like diabetes and high blood pressure and whatever's wrong with their kids or whatnot. If you're talking about like the specifics of an orthopedic surgery or urologic surgery or something, I'm going to send them to the appropriate specialist. No one at the legislature is a specialist. One, because they don't come in as specialists. Two, because they don't get any training on how to be a specialist. And everybody likes to talk about term limits as like no one should be a career politician. But what you get when you have career politicians is people that are really, really good at it and understand the intricacies and nuances of particular issues. And quite frankly, these guys, they don't have the time. They don't have the time and they don't have the resources. So as it is completely frustrating to feel like, okay, it's literally your job to make this thing better. I'm telling you it needs to be better, and now you're asking me to tell you how to do it. It's super frustrating, but it's also the most likely avenue to get results. Does that answer? Does that? Yeah.
Another example I would give is like, so Representative Mickey Dollins from Southside, a freshman, the handsome guy, decently smart.
Olympic bobsledder.
Olympic bobsledder, yeah. So he's been there for like one term now. Asking him questions compared to Leslie Osborne in the House, who's been there for 10 years. She can talk circles around most guys up there about any issue because she is a sharp lady and she's been there long enough to understand and to research some of it. And that's part of it. It's like for folks that are new-ish, they haven't had enough time to learn it all. They've only been there, they were in session for 4 months, and then it's been this hodgepodge of emergencies for 10 more months. And so I know several hands came up. One thing I want to highlight on our letter to my legislator, there's 3 steps to every good advocacy statement. That is what you care about, why you care about it, why it's important to you, and what you want them to do about it. And so you can be specific on the first 2 steps, and the third part can be, a little more broad sometimes. But to Scott's point, there's nothing wrong with being general. The more specific, the better. But send both, man. Just be like, fun education. And if they say, what does that mean? And you come back and you say, ball and dice, right. You might just get ball and dice. And and then you're like, oh, we need more. And they're like, well, that's what you said. And you're like, I know, but I'm a teacher. And they're like, yeah, well, I make boots. I don't know what to tell you. And so it is hard because the impetus is on us as voters to put people there who are educated, who take the time to learn issues, and who are willing to dig in and learn it. And if they're not willing to, then that's for us to step up. And it's awesome if you ever watch any kind of hearing or committee meeting where they call on someone who knows what's up. And they challenge a voter, and the voter's like, yeah, well, boom, and they start rattling off stuff. Nothing I love more than a legislator who is on their heels because a voter comes equipped with information and can make them put them in their place, because then it's yes, that's what it's all about. All right,
Ash.
yes, ma'am. Oh. Yeah.
So where are those resources for education? So if I belong to another advocacy group, I get a text message from them that says, this is what's being voted on today, here's a specific ask. I could do that.
Yeah.
It takes 5 seconds out of the workday as opposed to hours of research. So where do we go for those kinds of things for education to get those quick
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And do they pay attention to those form letters?
Right. So two questions, both great questions. One, where do you go for information about what it is you care about? And I'll do a general. It's education or healthcare or whatever. To the extent you can, try to find whatever trade group or union or organization it is that kind of represents that. And if you need help with that, send me an email and I'll help you get plugged in with them. Most groups send out emails. Scott's mentioned OK Policy, the Oklahoma Policy Institute. They kind of do a broad cover on things of like education, criminal justice, tax,
Healthcare.
budget and taxes, and healthcare. But there's groups for everything, right? And so every group has their emails. And so getting industry-specific organizations is probably the best way because none of us can track everything. Like I have friends that work when all the bills are announced in January, December.
Deadline is first week of December, I think.
So I think
Last week of
December-ish when they announce all the bills they're going to hear, whatever it is. I love texting my friends who work in education because there's websites they just type in keywords and search for all the bills that contain the word education, and there's like 1,800 of them, and they have to go through and read all the bills, which is why this year we knew that there was 4 bills about
sunscreen,
about teachers applying sunscreen to students and who can do that and should they, and it was just. And so I like searching for weird words about that kind of stuff just to see if there's any bills out there. So industry-specific groups. If you need help, like I said, email me. I'm kind of aware of most of those, and I can find them if I'm not. Second question was, do the form letter emails work? And the short answer is no, actually, because there's a good chance they end up with a whole stack of those emails that look just alike. You can like send 30,000 of them and shut down their computer.
Right. And
you've just blocked everyone else who wants to actually send an email that's personal. And so if you can, send in a personal message and in the subject line say, email from constituent.
Yep.
So like, I am a constituent. That will bump it up because there'll be other emails in there from lobbyists whose names they know and whatever other spam we all get, But to say like, constituent email, boom, they will find that. Their LA will find that. And then say, what's that?
No. So that's what's good. Next thing I was going to say is many of them, some of them are very public about this. They aren't all, but many, if not all of them, want you to include your address in the email. Because if you say email from a constituent, that subject line, they're going to want to know, like, where is this person in my district?
Yeah.
Is this person actually my constituent or not?
An example of that is when I was in Irvin Yin's district, when I went in to meet him, he said, where do you live? So I told him my address, and he said, is that Randy McDaniel's district? And I said, yeah. He was like, oh, he's my rep too. And it occurred to me that like senators and House reps overlap, right, but not entirely. Yeah. And so he was trying to connect with me on something right then, and I was like, oh yeah. He's like, he's a good guy. And I was like, I haven't met him yet. I'm going to go in like an hour. But I like that he made that, and he kind of knew his district a little bit. Some districts are squirrely, like their shape. But yeah, so putting that you're a constituent, put your name and address in there and your phone number. Often if you put your phone number, they'll give you a call back. Yeah. And a lot of legislators will give you their cell phone number. I have so many legislators' cell phone numbers. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah.
Grant? Yeah. Yeah. Right. It probably helps if you're on TV. Another example is Senator Adam Pugh. Last year I had messaged him about a Medicaid-related bill. It was healthcare-related. It was in his committee, and I said, I think you can hear this. I'd like to talk to you about it. and I advocated my position on that bill to vote no on it. And I like texted him because I had his number. Again, this is weird. He doesn't have Facebook or anything, so it's tough. And then I happened to be walking down the hallway in the Capitol, and he stuck his head out and said, "Andy, hey, what's up with this healthcare bill?" And I realized like I had messaged him and said, "Here's what you need to do," and I thought I did my part, and like I went on, and he was like, "I don't understand any of this, but if there's debate, I have to ask questions. Like I can't just vote. I need to know about it and explain it to my caucus and everyone else." And so it like was a light bulb for me of like, "Oh right, do you have 5 minutes? Yeah, okay, let's sit down so we can talk about the ins and outs of this really quick in terms he would understand." He voted the opposite way, and at least I tried, right? I don't know. You can't win them all.
And I mean, I had a rep recently that I've gotten to know that knows me. Actually, hey, Scott, it's like, guys, like, I got this bill that's getting out of the Senate. They want me to sponsor it. We take a look at it. I'm gonna send you the language. Take a look at it. Tell me what you think. Tell me if we need to make any changes, amendments. I was like, what? And so I like read it and like send it back. I'm like, oh, here's what I would change. It's like, dude, like I just like influenced like policy maybe if it's, but like it was just because it's a healthcare related bill. I work in healthcare and I know this legislator, and he was like, I want to know what you think.
Yeah,
like
so education bills, they'll ask what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say too, especially with emails, also with calling, is I've gotten the best response, kind of like what she was saying, if you have a specific ask. So I'm asking you to vote no on blah bill, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Because and here's why, and include your address, and then also with calling, that helps me, I think feel a lot more confident in calling because I can. All you have to say is I'm asking you to vote yes or no on this, and here's why. And
Yeah.
that makes the tally, and that takes a little bit of the, I guess, scary
Yeah.
One
calling. Like, what am I supposed to say?
one thing that I would say, and jump in if you think this is wrong, but one thing that I would say is probably not helpful is like to every day call your legislator like, hey, Representative Smith, this is John Johnson, and I'm calling because I want you to vote no on this. And then tomorrow, hey, Representative Smith, John Johnson, calling again, telling you to vote no on it. Like, you can call multiple times or email multiple times, but one, those phone calls and emails are going to have a lot more influence if they know who you are by sight, so that it comes back to that relationship. But two, you kind of want to, until you have that kind of close relationship, you want to don't overdo it, right? Like if you are too aggressive or try to come too much at the same time at one time, it's really easy to drown that out.
It's just like parents and students in your classroom. Like, you know those parents they call every day.
No, we don't have any of those.
What else? Yep.
So I know you guys did the pub crawl stuff.
Yeah.
Midtown, uptown, like that part of Oklahoma City. I mean, is there? Because I know, like for me, I'm like, well, as long as I get chosen as a delegate, and as long as like, you know, it's hard to not be at work
Right.
regularly
Yeah.
to build those relationships. Is that something you guys feel like could be expanded to include other parts of the city
Yeah.
and different representatives, so we can get to know people in this kind of setting? And
Yeah. So I was thinking about that a lot today. So her question is about we do an event called a Capitol Crawl, which is a pub crawl with legislators. So like this, but with legislators. And we did it last year a whole bunch. And it's tough to sustain because things get busy and people get tired of each other over the course of a thing. But coming up after the election in November, there will be a day in December where everyone takes their oath of office. And we like to have an event called Hall and Oaths, where we pack the halls and watch them take their oath of office. And then that was the night that we had our first Capitol Crawl, and I plan to do it again this year. And we just invite everybody. Like, it would be awesome if all 149 legislators all came. They won't. That's fine. But it's a good time to kind of meet them on our turf, right? Like, not in the big marble Capitol, but like out at like a dive bar or something. And I think we would love to do that as our organization in places like Edmond, Norman, Yukon, whatever. Also, just do it yourself. Like, if you can, chances are, if you can get like 10 voters in one place and promise that you'll deliver 10 voters, they will show up. because that's 10 votes, and a lot of these folks are elected by like not that many votes.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
And
if you,
teachers make a difference because we're numbers.
Right.
We don't have a lot of money, but we have numbers.
Right.
That makes a big difference.
yeah, if you can get 10 teachers to say, hey, we're going to show up and meet with you, that goes a long way. As an example, and someone mentioned city council earlier, in War Acres, last election for city council in War Acres, there was a seat, and the guy won 12 votes to 8. You couldn't get 13 people to vote for you in your district, so like,
Don't have 13 friends.
right, like, and live, that's like 4 houses, and so things, the more local the election, the bigger impact it has on your life, right? So city council stuff sets, income or sales tax for your city and zoning laws and all that. The state, by the same extension, it's in your area. It's really important, and they're often elected by just a few dozen or a few hundred votes. Your vote matters, and if you can get other voters to turn out, they pay attention.
My favorite example of this, it's not unique, it's not an Oklahoma example, but I think it illustrates the point. The Virginia House of Delegates, so Virginia had a big election recently. Control of the Virginia House of Delegates, okay, came down to one vote. One vote, one district, determined the party that had control, and determine whether or not that party aligned with the governor's party. So control of state government in Virginia came down to one vote. We had a special election recently in Oklahoma, up in Tulsa, for the state senate election. I want to say like 4,000 or 5,000 people voted, decided by 29 votes. 29 votes. We had a state House election, the most recent special election that we had for the House in Oklahoma. Andy mentioned House districts in Oklahoma represent about 38,500 people. Guesses on how many people voted? 1,800. 1,800 people out of 38,500 people. 1,800 people showed up to vote. So that means there's 36,000 people in that district who have no say in their representation in the legislature because they decided not to come. So at the end of the day, all of this about effective advocacy is important, and we all need to do it. And I think our hope is that because you guys are here tonight, you guys went to the walkout. A week later, you're like, I haven't had enough, so I'm gonna come to the pub on a Monday night and listen to two random guys talk about how maybe we could do this better. Our hope is that you guys will be ambassadors for this going forward, right? Like, if this is really going to change, it's not going to just be the 40 of us showing up to vote. It's going to be the 40 of us getting 5 friends to vote, right? And getting those people to get 5 friends to vote.
That's 200 people.
Right? Like, that's how this changes, but nothing will stay the same when turnout for special elections is at 2, 3, 4, 5%, and turnout for gubernatorial elections is at 48%. Like, if that's the status quo, none of this gets better. So as we're kind of wrapping up, I would leave you with 2 things. 1, vote, 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 vote. Tell everyone you know to vote. Educate yourselves on the issue. Educate your friends on the issues, and vote. Take off work to vote. I myself will be off work. I will be driving people to the polls on election day. Yeah.
High five.
One way we have not talked about that you can get involved if you want to kind of do advocacy in a little bit different way is you can volunteer for a campaign. Anyone who is running for office needs money, and they need volunteers. They need people to knock on doors. They need people to hand out flyers. They need people to phone bank. And on election day, they need people to drive voters to the polls. So if you want to advocate in that way, that's kind of another way that you can be involved. That's what I'll be doing on election day. But the last thing that I would leave you with, this sounds like a group that's pretty fired up. We've heard from a lot of people that felt like the walkout was not successful, or maybe it didn't achieve everything that we wanted it to. What I would say to that is, regardless of what happened for the 9 days you guys were at the Capitol, we have roughly a $1.5 billion hole for education funding in this state. You guys got 30% of that back in 4 weeks. Like, that's incredible. Like, that is mind-blowing, okay? But the next 30% is going to be harder. And the 30% after that is going to be harder still. And if that just gets us back to the status quo. If we're going to really invest, right, if we're going to really try and make Oklahoma, not a 49 or a 34, but like if we want states around the country and education systems around the world to look at Oklahoma as a model for how you should take care of your kids and educate them, it's going to take even more money beyond that 1.5 billion. And that's going to be harder still. But all of that has to start with all of us going out and making a difference now.
That's right.
As a new normal.
That's
That's
a
right.
new normal.
Because
Right.
I was at Hospital 1017 back when my almost 3-year-old was in a stroller. And when we won that victory, the first thing they told us is you need to come back in 3 to 5 years. And it was before the internet and before social media. We didn't go back. And that's part of why we're here today. And it's not like we have to go win this it's a battle after battle. And it's got to be a new normal to keep educating and advocating and showing up at the polls. And the one thing they told us back then is teachers have huge numbers, and if they all show up at the polls, they can make the biggest difference.
That's right. People used to be elected on the backs of teachers. If you didn't get teacher support, you didn't get elected. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. So, all right, we'll wrap up. Hey, thank you to all of you for being here tonight. This is huge. Thank you so much. We'll hang out. If you have questions, come out, mingle, talk amongst yourselves.
If you missed the sign-up sheet, again, if you wouldn't mind giving us your email, we'd really appreciate it. If you like this kind of stuff, let's pod this. It's out every Friday.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Remember, you can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at Let's Fix This OK. Scott is at SC Melson, and Andy is at AndyOKC. You can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Let's Fix This OK. Our website is letsfixthisok.org, and there you can sign up for our newsletter, read our blog, find resources and details about upcoming events. Our podcast is edited and produced by Scott and me, and Let's Fix This is a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network. Our theme music is generously provided by the Sugar-Free All-Stars. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage with their government. We encourage you to get involved in any way that you can, and remember, decisions are made by those who show up.